You tell yourself you're fine, that time has passed, that the worst is over. But why then does a certain smell, a certain silence, a certain glance still unravel you? Why does your breath catch when you pass that street, that house, that memory? Why do you find yourself shrinking in rooms where you should have expanded, laughing when you wanted to cry, staying quiet when your soul was screaming to be heard? There's a haunting truth you've been circling around for years, maybe your whole life. You're still trying to heal in the very place that broke you. And it's not just a physical place. It's the family dynamic you keep returning to, hoping they'll finally see you. It's the friend group where love is conditional, and your silence is the price of inclusion. It's the relationship where your worth was whittled down into obedience, where you learned to equate being chosen with being hurt. You keep going back not because you're weak, but because some part of you is still holding onto the illusion that, if you could just prove your value there, you'd finally be enough. But how can a wound heal when it's being reopened every time you breathe? How can you learn to fly in a cage that taught you your wings were a burden? You weren't born to live in defense of your own existence. But the mind is tricky, the heart even more so. It remembers who gave you love and who made you suffer, often confusing the two when they arrived wrapped in the same arms. So now every act of self-betrayal feels like loyalty. Every compromise feels like love. Every time you shrink, you call it keeping the peace. But here's the brutal, sacred question. What if the place you're trying to heal and only knows how to hurt you? What if the people you're trying to win over need you to stay wounded because your strength would threaten their comfort? What if the version of you they're used to isn't your healed self, but your broken self, the one who doesn't ask for much, doesn't speak too loud, doesn't outgrow the role they assigned you? And what if healing isn't about fixing things within the same walls, but about having the courage to leave the house that taught you pain was home? This isn't about running away. It's about remembering who you were before the betrayal, before the abandonment, before the silence. You don't owe your healing to the place that destroyed your innocence. The deeper question, can you walk away not just physically, but psychologically from the environment, the relationships, the beliefs that keep resurrecting your wounds? Because healing isn't passive. It's not something that happens to you just because time moves forward. Healing is a rebellion, and it begins the moment you stop hoping they'll change and start realizing you must. You've heard it said that time heals all wounds, but whoever said that never sat in a room full of ghosts, because sometimes time doesn't heal, it preserves. It freezes the past in amber, trapping you inside cycles you can't escape. You keep telling yourself you're moving forward. You're not. You're moving in circles, orbiting the old pain, the old betrayal, the old abandonment. And here's the dark secret no one wants to say out loud. The mind clings to the familiar, even if the familiar is the source of suffering. This is the hidden problem deep in your psyche, is a paradox. The place that hurt you is also the place that taught you how to love, how to belong, how to feel seen, even if that visibility came with violence, silence, or shame. Your childhood didn't give you a choice. It built the walls of your first home. And in those walls, you learned the rules of survival. Stay quiet to be safe, please then to be loved, shrink to fit, numb your needs. You didn't choose those rules. They were etched into your nervous system long before you understood what choice even meant. And now, as an adult, you keep returning to that same blueprint, hoping if you obey the rules just a little better, maybe this time, you'll finally be loved without condition. Carl Jung called this the compulsion to repeat, the unconscious drive to recreate the original wound over and over again in the hope of finding a different ending. But you can't rewrite history in the same place it was written. You can't find salvation from the very people who built your cage. Philosophers have long wrestled with this. What is freedom? What is selfhood? Is it enough to walk away from the tyrant? Or must you also exile the tyrant you've internalized? Because the real prison isn't up there, it's inside. It's in the way you speak to yourself, still echoing their criticisms. It's in the way you flinch at kindness, suspicious of any tenderness, that might one day turn cold. To heal, you have to unlearn the very language you were taught to survive. But that unlearning comes at a price. It means giving up the hope that the people who hurt you will one day become the people you needed them to be. And that hope is often the last thing you're willing to surrender. Because it's not just hope, it's the thread connecting you to them. It's the part of you that still believes you'll be saved from the loneliness that first taught you how to endure. But as long as you cling to that hope, you remain bound to the place that broke you. Here lies the tragic irony. The child in you wants to be saved by the same hand that pushed you into the dark. The adult in you must become the hand that leads yourself out. And that means seeing the hidden problem for what it is. The very environment that created your wounds is not the environment that can heal them. The very people whose love felt like poison will never become medicine. The voice that says you are too much, too needy, too sensitive, is not a voice you must keep obeying. You must dismantle the cathedral of suffering built in your mind. You must learn to stand in the rubble, empty-handed, afraid, and say, I will build something new, even if I build it alone. That is the philosophical crucible of healing, not repairing what was, but creating what never existed. The past cannot be fixed, the wound cannot be undone, but it can be transformed by refusing to keep bleeding for people who never learned how to stop cutting you. And that begins the moment you stop asking the place that broke you to make you whole. You tell yourself you can endure it, that you can stay and wait, that patience is virtue, that love means loyalty, even when it wounds you. But beneath the surface, the price of staying is mounting. You don't notice it at first. The way your laughter becomes smaller, the way your voice softens into apology, even when you've done nothing wrong. You don't notice how your boundaries blur, how you tolerate what once would have shattered you. You call it resilience, but it's erosion. Because here is the consequence no one warns you about. Every day you stay in the place that broke you, you become fluent in its language of self-abandonment. You learn to anticipate every threat, every withdrawal of affection. You learn to read the room before you read your own heart. You learn that love means fear, that closeness means tension, that your safety depends on someone else's mood. And slowly, you forget you once deserved better. You forget there was a time you were bright and guarded, hungry for life. You forget there was a time you were fearless in your dreams, bold in your hope, tender without apology. Now you call cynicism wisdom. You call numbness strength, but these are not virtues. They are scars. They are the consequences of learning how to survive in an environment that devours your softness. You wonder why your relationships falter, why you sabotage love that tries to hold you gently. You wonder why you flinch at kindness, why you grow restless in peace. It's because your nervous system has been taught that pain is familiar, that tension is normal, that chaos is home. And here's the devastating truth. The longer you stay in the place that broke you, the more you risk becoming the architect of your own suffering. You start building cages inside your mind, mirroring the cages you once inhabited. You become your own jailer, enforcing the rules you swore you'd never obey again. You silence yourself before others do. You abandon yourself before anyone else can. And worst of all, you start to believe this is just who you are. But it isn't. It's who you became to survive. It's the armor you forged when you realized love could not be trusted, that safety was a luxury you'd never afford. And every day you stay, you reinforce the lie that you are powerless, that you are too damaged to escape, that healing is something you must earn by enduring more pain. This is the consequence that ruins lives in slow motion. The belief that you cannot build a life outside the ruins. The belief that if you leave, you will lose everything. That loneliness is worse than betrayal. But that's the wound talking. That's the environment speaking through you, keeping you small, obedient, contained, because the place that broke you wants you to believe you cannot live without it. But you can. And until you do, every moment you remain is another brick in the wall between who you are and who you were meant to become. There comes a moment when the ache of staying outweighs the terror of leaving, a moment when you look around the familiar walls, the faces you've memorized, the rituals you've endured, and you realize they will never become the refuge you needed them to be. This moment is quiet, almost imperceptible. It happens in the pause between one breath and the next, when something in you whispers, "Enough." That whisper is the spark of rebellion. It doesn't matter how small it is, how fragile. It is the beginning of your liberation. Because healing isn't gentle, it isn't passive. Healing is a fight for your own soul. And the first act of rebellion is naming what happened. Naming the abuse, the betrayal, the neglect. Naming the way you were taught to doubt yourself. The way you were trained to serve other people's comfort at the cost of your sanity. Because what you do not name, you cannot change. The second act is refusing to wait for their permission. Refusing to negotiate your freedom with those who benefited from your captivity. They will call you selfish. They will say you're overreacting, that you're cruel, that you're imagining things. But this is the language of the old prison, the chorus that kept you quiet. Listen instead to the trembling voice inside you that says, "I want more. I deserve more." Then, act. Set the boundary. Speak the truth. Pack the bag. Walk out of the house that taught you your presence was a burden. Hang up the call that leaves you hollow. Stand in front of the mirror and say the thing you've been terrified to say out loud. "I'm done bleeding for those who will never stop cutting me. This will not be clean." You will doubt yourself. You will fear the loneliness. You will miss the pain because pain was the ghost that kept you company in the night. But this is the price of freedom, enduring the void long enough for new life to grow. You will be tempted to go back. You will bargain with yourself. You will try to prove you're worthy of love there one last time. But that path leads nowhere. You know this. You've traveled it so many times your feet are blistered. Freedom is forward, into the unknown, into the raw wilderness of possibility. You will fall. You will grieve. You will question everything you believed about love, about loyalty, about yourself. But each step away from the place that broke you is a step toward the person you were always meant to be. And slowly, the ache of loneliness becomes the thrill of solitude. The silence you feared becomes the space where your real voice finally echoes. The emptiness becomes possibility. You start to build new walls, new rituals, new relationships, ones that do not demand your self-abandonment as proof of your devotion. You begin to realize your healing is not a gift someone else will grant you. It is something you must seize with trembling hands and fierce resolve, because the rebellion is not just against them. It is against every voice in your head that told you your needs were too much, your dreams too foolish, your heart too soft. And in this rebellion, you do not become hard. You do not become cold. You become sovereign. You become whole. You become free. You think healing is the end of pain, that one day you'll wake up and the scars will be gone, that the memories will lose their teeth, that your heart will stop flinching at old ghosts. But here's the ultimate truth. Healing isn't erasure. It's transformation. You never stop carrying the past. You never stop remembering the places that hurt you, but you learn to stop living there. The final, most powerful realization is that the place that broke you was never your home. It was the crucible that shaped you, the fire that burned away your illusions, the wilderness that forced you to find your own path. It wasn't love. It wasn't safety. It wasn't belonging. It was the proving ground for your courage. You see it now with clear eyes. You see how they taught you to doubt your worth because they feared their own emptiness. You see how they called your needs too much because they could never meet their own. You see how they mistook control for love, silence for peace, sacrifice for virtue. And you realize you do not have to inherit their sickness. You do not have to continue the cycle. You do not have to carry their story in your body, your voice, your heart. You can end it here. And ending it is not betrayal. It is liberation. Because love is not suffering. Loyalty is not martyrdom. Healing is not staying silent to keep others comfortable. Healing is building a new reality where your voice matters, where your needs are valid, where your softness is a gift rather than a liability. Healing is claiming your own worth without apology. It is looking at the ruins of what broke you and saying, I am not what you did to me. I am what I choose to become. This is the final truth. The wound does not define you. Your response does. You could spend your life haunted by the past, building shrines to those who never learned to love you well. Or you can walk away, carrying only the wisdom carved into your bones, the tenderness that survived the fire, the resilience that learned how to bloom in a barren field. You will never get back the innocence they took, but you can build something better, a fierce, conscious love for yourself that does not depend on their approval. You can be the shelter you were denied. You can be the safe place you never found. You can be the one who stays, even when the world grows dark. Because in the end, the real healing isn't waiting for them to change. It's realizing you never needed them to grant you permission to live. You were always free. You were always enough. You were always whole beneath the scars, beneath the rubble, beneath the shattered illusions. And now, you have the chance to build a life that honors that truth. A life where you do not shrink. A life where you do not apologize for your needs. A life where you do not confuse love with suffering. The place that broke you is just that, a place, a chapter, a ghost. You are the author now, and you get to choose what comes next. Let the past tremble at your rising. Let the old voices fade into silence, because you have become the thing they feared most. Someone who refuses to stay small. Someone who chooses light. Someone who chooses themselves. And that choice is where healing begins and where the old story ends.